I'm calling in from New York City, where I reside. I grew up in New York, and my family is originally from South Africa. They came to the United States in the 70s, and I was born here in New York, and have consider myself a global citizen, but I'm a New Yorker, and I've been involved in the world of giving back ever since a very young age. I got involved in various community service programs and community engagement programs with the idea of connecting with like-minded individuals from different parts of the world, from different parts of my community, from other communities close to our community, to try to get out of the bubble that we all live in. We all live in some bubble where we surround ourselves with, or where we are surrounded with folks who are similar to us. And I've found that it's very important to break out of that bubble, and you can have a more enlightening life and by connecting with people and working with people who are from outside of that bubble that you tend to grow up with. So I also my background is in the hospitality and travel and tourism business. I am in the restaurant business here in New York, and I spent about 10 years running the Africa Travel Association, which is a tourism organization that works to promote tourism from around the world to the African continent. So the hospitality and travel and tourism industry is my business interest.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Eddie. You bring in a lot of diversity with you, and it's so great to bring that perspective onto the webinar today. We'll be diving into more about what made you how did you end up being into the nonprofit sector and the development field. We'll talk about it a bit more as we go on, but just a reminder as we move on, how will this insights move forward, like the webinar will move forward. I have some questions, and I and my team have prepared them for our speakers today. So we'll be asking them some exciting questions along the way. But those who are listening in, make sure to ask questions, write down your comments, and we'll take them as we go along. And we'll try our best to accommodate all the questions that you're asking. But if not, then our team is there on support, and they'll try best to provide the answers for you. Right. So once again, thank you for joining in, our speakers and all those who are watching us right now live on Facebook. So moving forward to our actual discussion point, which is the world of nonprofits. And I would want to start off with Louis. Louis, how did you actually step into the nonprofit world? What was your journey like? How did you end up understanding? Like, if you were to explain us in a nutshell about the why behind stepping into this world, what would it be?
First of all, as I mentioned, I have been a mayor of Bugesera district. One of the major responsibility of the mayor is just to coordinate local development and to help people work or develop themselves by supporting local initiatives. So when I joined the nonprofit sector, when I was nominated body member of MC-Rwanda, it was really like something which I appreciated, because it was like continuing my mission, continuing my responsibilities of supporting people to get out of poverty. As you know, currently in the world there is what we call unequal distribution of resources. We are still facing with poverty challenges in developing countries. As per World Bank statistics of last year, 2020, 590 million of people were under poverty, and they are still in the extreme poverty. As a consequence, those who are in extreme poverty, they are still not afford to provide for basics. They don't have access on education. They don't have access on health. Really, we are still seeing many issues of refugees around the world due to conflicts, due to wars that we are still seeing in some parts of the world, in Africa, Asia, and all those ongoing issues create a lot of problems. Governments alone can't afford to solve all those problems. They need to be supported. They need stakeholders. This is where I'm seeing the importance of non-profit organizations can intervene to help government serve those people who are in need, those poor people who need to be supported, to be empowered so that they can really generate revenues that can support them to pay for themselves for the basics. Non-government organizations are really helpful, and they intervene to support governments because governments are not able, they have limited resources. So I'm now seeing the world needing more caring societies which can support each other to tackle on those issues which make people live on poverty, live in critical situations. So really, I'm happy, and it was really very amazing and interesting job and mission to join non-profit organizations.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing about that. Eddie, what was your story like?
Sure. And I apologize. I was given some feedback. There was some background noise, so I just changed my headphone here. So do let me know if it's not clear. And thinking back on my own experiences, and I think where and MC and I think it was a very much sort of grassroots journey in setting up MCW. It was a couple young people. I was 17 at the time, who had the opportunity to connect with other young people from different backgrounds, and we recognized that the problems that we face both at home in the United States, where I'm from, in our own communities, whether it's in our own backyards or in our own states, or with our fellow global citizens around the world, there are a lot of similarities in the problems, and everything is relative, and the degrees of the problems are different. But ultimately, what we realized is that one way of addressing these issues is to come together and to work in a motto of what we call at MCW local change through global exchange. So bringing together young people to work on and to bring their ideas and their experiences, but also to also work with other people and to also listen and to see how we can effectuate change through bringing together people of different backgrounds and different experiences, both from government, from nonprofit, from the educators, and of course, young people and students, and of course, most importantly, working as equals with beneficiaries, that we essentially as partners, viewing the world of doing good. It's not a one-way flow it's a two-way flow, because oftentimes what I always try to do when I talk to folks, when I try to get them into volunteering and trying to get them excited about giving back, I always try to explain that when you give back, you actually gain more. There's no for your than you ever could imagine, and one should always view things as it's a privilege and an honor to be able to serve, and folks can do that at any level that they're in society, in the world, because it can make a difference. It's just about going out and just doing it.
Beautiful. I think what I'm sensing from both of these stories, from Louis and Eddie, is that you both identified a pain point. There was a dire need. There was something that the community required, and then bringing everybody together, whether it is collaborating with the government, with other nonprofits, with other individual stakeholders, bringing people together. That has been a commonality here, and that really shows what I mean, when somebody's starting off their nonprofit, what are the values that they think of? What is something that they might be mindful of or they need to be mindful of? So thank you so much for sharing these powerful stories with us, and hope this gave some insight to our viewers out here. This brings me to my next question, which is that thinking back on your own experiences, are there any specific instances where you felt or saw the impact of nonprofit on a community? Like where you were serving, where your nonprofit or your partner organization was serving, and you felt like, hey, this is a direct impact, an indirect impact, and it changed the way you think about the nonprofit world. So, Louis, since you're unmuted, let's go with first with you.
Uh, Thank you. Really few examples from my previous experience at the Bugesera district. When I joined that district, 4 sectors out of 10 didn't have a health center, a health facility where local people can go and access health services. But in partnership with different non-government organizations, Access Project, World Vision, Plan International, we managed to build 4 modern health centers. And from those 4 health centers, more than 120,000 people had access on health services. And this was really amazing, and it was really a transformational journey when people themselves can testify for long past ago, they didn't have access on health, but due to the partnership between government and non-profit organizations, their dreams of accessing health services within their community became a reality. So this was really fantastic, but it was not only in health sector, but also in education. I remember the district partnered with the non-profit organizations, and we constructed more than 600 new classrooms, which helped 24,000 students to improve their learning conditions. Modern classrooms, well equipped. I think everyone can feel that change, how people were excited to have access to complete those more than 600 classrooms and give them to the community to help improving the educational environment. So coming on MC-Rwanda, we had a community center where thousands of youth benefited from skills development, technical skills, vocational skills. Most of them, they learned how to do the ICT skills, how to learn a computer, how to use a computer in their local development initiatives. You know, now the world is going digital, and the computer skills now are becoming basic, like reading, like really being literate. So they use from the location where we have a community center, have access on the computer. They learn the basic computer skills so that they can use the computer skills, internet in their local development projects. So now they have transformed their life, they changed, they have incomes, now they can sustain their lives. In Rwanda, we have so many NGOs that are doing an amazing job in partnership with the government. So I think if you can think how Rwanda was just after 1994 genocide, but if we can see where we are today, Rwanda is a country in progress. We are seeing a lot of change. We are seeing a lot of transformation in different sectors, and all those changes come from the partnership, the working together between the government, stakeholders, which include the non-profits, of course. Thank
Beautiful. I just have a follow-up question, Louis, before we move forward. It's just that how, I mean, we identify a lot of impact being thousands, hundreds of thousands in number, right? Direct and indirect impact in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, in terms of skills development, and the accessibility of resources have been immense. So just giving, being, if the resources are accessible, people do benefit hugely. After all, when you sit down today and you understand the impact that has been made throughout these collaborations, how does that make you feel as a
Uh,
development practitioner or somebody who's working in the community?
Simply, I feel proud of being a part of that journal. Of course, from the previous responsibilities of being a member of local government to now being a body member of MCR. Really, it's a proud. I'm proud of it. Really, I feel excited, and I still strong interested in keep working, in keep progressing together with our team, our MCR staff, MCR management and body members, of course, with the support from the MCW, because we are part of the global network. We are part of a global strong team, which can make a strong change, a strong impact on the field, changing lives of people, helping people to transform their lives by using their own skills, by improving their own skills. And that's something that I'm feel proud is contributing to sustainable development, because it's easy to help people, giving them money, solve their money problem issues, but that is not sustainable. The one way the change can be sustainable is the way we help people to help themselves. We give them skills to use it in their daily life, to use it to learn their own projects that can sustainably make them improve their situations. And of course, this makes me feel proud than ever. Thank you.
Thanks, Louis, for that. That's beautiful. Eddie, over to you.
Yeah, sure. And Louis, I just want to add that I had the opportunity to visit Bugesera right when we were looking at starting the MCR program, and it's truly incredible the progress that has been made in your country, but also in your community and in the area that you were had the responsibility to serve as mayor over for those years. And it's just it's inspiring. And you know, and you also challenge us in the global community on what we should be doing and what we can be doing, because even if I look at my own city, which is New York City, we have not made that type of progress during these years that you've progressed in such a major way. And if I had it my way, I would much rather you serve as mayor of New York than our current mayor, which is who's done a disaster in the last 7 years. So, but one day we can talk more about that. But I guess when it comes to MCW, I think that I have two thoughts in terms of thinking back and areas where I feel that that I'm really proud of the impact that we're having. Of course, those that are on the call, I'm assuming, are familiar with MCW and can view the website. And I think we have many stakeholders that are part of this community and know, and probably in some ways better than I do, what the impact is right now, because you're part of the story. But what's most inspiring to me is how MCW 20 plus years later is continuing stronger than it was in the prior 20 years. And there's a new team of leadership. There's a team that is brilliant. There's a team that has a sense of ownership over this organization. There's a team that is just as passionate as I was 20 years ago, and more passionate perhaps today than I am. And I'm inspired by that passion. And this new team brings me along and wants me to continue to stay engaged and support. But it's not the Eddie MCW as it was 20 years ago. It is now MCW Global, and of course that's under the leadership of Khalid, and then the team that Khalid's put together, which includes you, Anusha, and then of course the MCX model, where we have our the programs that we've started are essentially operating as independent local NGOs. And I just learned yesterday in Tanzania of a grant that was received through the dental program independently. And each of these groups are operating as independent NGOs where MCW supports, but MCW doesn't dictate how things run. And I think that's the best way that you can make a difference in terms of, because you really can't impose your ideas from abroad or from outside of a community. If you want to have an impact, you've got to work with the community and support the community and be a resource for the community. And of course, give some ideas, and some of those ideas will stick and some of them may not. And when it comes to the people aspect, you've got to find people that are gonna do a better job than you can do and own it and run with it. And I think now there's a whole new generation that's being built. And I think Khalid probably will say the same thing one day that I'm saying, and I'm sure he's thinking the same thing. The second is it's just a short story that in the spirit of what I've just mentioned, that took place in December. My oldest daughter, she was born on New Year's Eve, so she celebrated her 7th birthday, and we've all been under this lockdown globally, and so there was no birthday party. We had a Zoom program where we invited all of her friends on Zoom and played a few Zoom games. And Nora came up with the idea that she wanted to help people. She wanted to give back. And Khalid was very kind enough to work with Nora and came on the birthday call and shared some photographs of MC Zambia and the community center in Zambia and the literacy program that we have there. And ultimately, the kids that were on the call got together and they raised some money, and they put through, instead of giving Nora birthday presents and sending her gifts later on after the party, they contributed the money that would have been equal to the gifts. And they then purchased MCZ, then used those funds and came up with a plan and purchased books for the library locally. And was important for Nora because Nora loves to read, but also Nora likes to have fun. And she plays a lot of board games and she's into art. So Nora suggested that, is it possible that perhaps some board games and some art supplies can also be purchased? And without sort of imposing that idea, Khalid brought it back to MCZ and they thought it was a great idea. And just last week, we received photographs that shows the children in Zambia and the literacy program all playing Scrabble outside and doing arts and crafts programs. The books that we that were purchased were all local books, appropriate books to support the curriculum in Zambia. When we first started MCW, Khalid and I, many years back, had sent over a container of books we received from donors from New York, and it was a 40 by 40 foot container, and many of those books ended up in locations where those books were not appropriate for the particular where they were going to. And I think we learned from that experience that it's not just about getting books, but it's about getting the right books, because you got to find things that support the local education curriculum, things that support that tie in. So rather than sending over sort of used books, raise funds and to be able to use those funds in a way that supports the local educational curriculum. So that to me that was one of the highlights of the COVID lockdown that we've been under. It's been a highlight, a more recent highlight of my sort of what sort of gives me hope about the future. And it's wonderful to see your own children getting involved and making a difference, especially at a young age and following the MCW model. So I think Khalid now is going to be using this as a prototype, because there's a lot of young children out there that want to make a difference. And there's a lot of people out there that want to make a difference. They're just not sure how, and they have ideas. So MCW can continue to serve as a great vehicle. And it's really just about bringing people together, because there's a lot of good people out there, but you have to guide them, and you got to help bring them together in an appropriate way, that where it's not a one-way sort of giving model. It's a two-way.
Yeah. I love that. It's a journey where we're facilitating the process of change for others. And how I see it, it's like you both have had talked about something regarding sowing the seeds, not the exact words that you have to, that's my words, but how I've taken it is as like sowing the seed in the community and then that, giving results. Or it's like a ripple effect. You go on and that model of empowerment that, for example, MCW had the three MCX, like affiliate organizations, but as Eddie said, that they're independent organizations and they work on their own according to the needs of the communities rather than MCW dictating, for example. And that's the model that has been developed over the years, and that's beautiful. It's also how Louis said that it's empowering the community to help themselves. It's an empowerment model, and that's crucial to identify and understand. Moving forward, in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward to the next question. And since both of you come from different diverse perspectives, different sectors, this is an interesting question, which I am also interested in knowing, which is regarding with your experiences in the both for-profit and non-profit worlds, what's one big difference between the two? What's that one major difference that you would highlight between for-profit sector and non-profit? Louis, yeah.
For-profit organizations, they are driven by making a profit. And at the end, they measure their return on investment in terms of money. And the profit they have made are distributed among their shareholders. While for non-profit organizations, they are driven by making social impact, delivering on social needs to vulnerable people, to people most in need. So they are driven by making social impact, improving social conditions within community. Of course, there are some also differences which can be measured in terms of strategic goal, where for profit are looking for competitiveness, how they can compete on the market, achieving the large market share, growing fastly, making huge earnings, while on the non-profit, they are on achieving effectively their missions by creating large social impact and achieving cost efficiency and improving on their management practices. Yeah.
Great. Perhaps I can build on that a little bit and share that. I think that the world is changing very, very quickly. The change that has taken place in the last decade was probably significantly greater than the change that had taken place in the world for thousands of years before. And I think now in this new decade that we're in, our new century that we're in and decade, every year that takes place, things are just moving so quickly, and I think that's being accelerated through the technology ultimately. And as part of that, I think there is a movement within the nonprofit worlds to saying, how can we operate nonprofits more sustainably, and looking at not only the programs that we're working on and how can our programs be more sustainable and be less donor dependent, but also the organizations themselves, how can they become more sustainable? And there was a movement over the last 20 years, I think, about of a concept called social entrepreneurship, applying the principles of entrepreneurialism within the nonprofit world or within the government world of entrepreneurship. And I think today we see that nonprofits are very much looking at the for-profit model and saying from a how can we be more sustainable, both our programs and as well as us as an organizations through some entrepreneurial thinking and applying some of the principles that the for-profit world has used in being successful in the for-profit world. The for-profit world is rapidly changing. And a lot of this we find, in particular, it's changing in the United States. In the last over this past year during this pandemic, I think we're going to find that there's going to be a huge amount of change that's going to come out of this in so many different ways. But one area that is changing is that many for-profit companies are now being pressed by their shareholders, by their customers, and by society at large. And they're asking, what are you doing to make the world a better place? And there's always been, in the last 10 years, customers have been sort of, in certain sectors, customers have been socially conscious and of course, conscious of that. They're not, consumers have been conscious of where they're purchasing the power of the consumer and where they're using their money and where they're spending their money and not wanting to do things that are going to hurt society. But today, the investment community is also asking the same question. And there's something called ESGs, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. And ESGs investors are increasingly applying these non-financial factors as part of their analysis process to identify material risk and growth opportunities. So companies now are being measured in an increasingly growing way by ESGs, by the investment community, not necessarily only by the consumers and their customers. So investors are now asking companies, what are you doing as a private sector company to help in terms of measure your ESGs, your environmental, social, and governance? And I think that we're going to start seeing a rapid shift in the way that, particularly in the U.S., and I think this perhaps will have an international impact, and we'll start seeing this happening in other places. In other countries, this type of stuff has existed and has done quite well. In South Africa, we saw after apartheid, and when there was a newly elected government we saw that Black economic empowerment was something that was very important in terms of moving South Africa forward. And there was all sorts of different metrics that were placed on companies to ensure that there was going to be an equality and an equitable economic system growing. But in the United States, this has taken some time, and I think we're seeing our companies now have this pressure, and also we're finding that not only pressure, but it's also internally where private sector companies feel that they have to take a stance and they have to take a lead on social issues. And we've seen that if you've been following some of the events that have taken place in the US with some of the issues of race relations, if you followed the issues of in Georgia with respect to voting rights, we've seen now that that major private sector companies are now stepping up, and they're almost speaking like they're stepping out of the sort of the typical traditional role that a private sector company would be, and they're blurring into the other sectors. And it's going to be fascinating where this goes.
Wow. Also, when you talked about the like the merging between the two, like the for-profit sector learning from the nonprofit and being held accountable, there's also a new emerging, I think, sector which is a bridge between the two, which is also social sector, which is towards entrepreneurship mindset, but also keeping sustainability, like social impact, into perspective. That's also where a lot of organizations or youth, especially, I think that's a trend that we're seeing in our youth who are part of Young Leaders Access program, and they go back and they have their own social projects. That's a model that they're also going forward with in order to ensure that there's sustainability, there's financial sustainability, but the key role of the impact still stays there. And then what I'm also sensing here is the need to be held accountable. Previously, in the capitalist world that we live in, people were not, or organizations were not being held accountable. But what are we doing to measure that and to hold them accountable in that sense? So which is interesting. There's a question from audience, and it says it's for Eddie. So Somebody has asked, you've spent a big part of your life in both private sector and nonprofit world. I would like to hear from you. How do you think youth should be involved in the nonprofit world, work and community sustainable programs? How can local private sectors be involved in the world of nonprofit? How can they be motivated to cooperate, especially in African context?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I don't think I think that it's difficult to, in this day and age, to operate in one particular sector and say I'm going to go in this sector and this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life. But also, I'm going to even if it's not the rest of my life, if I'm going to take on a particular job or an entrepreneurial venture or a social entrepreneurial idea and say I'm going to do something and it's going to be in the nonprofit world. The sectors are so intertwined and so blurry these days that everything is connected, and you have to be able to operate in all of these different circles in order to be an effective leader and an effective at making change. If you can only operate as a capitalist in the for-profit world, you're not going to get too far in the year 2021. If you can only operate in the government world as a bureaucrat, you're not going to get too far in this day and age. And if you can only operate in the world of saying that I want to make the world a better place and focusing solely on the using solely on your on the doing good aspect, you're not going to get too far either, because you're not going to be sustainable, and you're not also going to be able to figure out how to get the resources to do what you need to do. So you really have to think of these three different sectors and try to get. I think if you're just sort of getting started, try to get some experience in these three different sectors. Go whether it's work experience, whether it's volunteering experience, whether it's through internships, but as much in a particular area. If you haven't, like, my background is in the travel and tourism business, so I have spent time working in the private sector in travel and tourism. I've spent time working with governments in the travel and tourism. And I've spent time working in the nonprofit sector, in the hospitality and tourism sector, in the museum world, and the cultural space. So if to be an effective leader in a particular area of your passion, try to get experience in these three different worlds, and it's very possible to do that concurrently. Yes, you can. There's a phrase that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So it's possible, and you can do that. Through, as I said, through volunteering, through internships, or through starting something yourself. But I really would encourage anyone out there who wants to make a difference to really try to figure out how to get your hands on and a little bit of experience understanding how these three sectors work, so that way you can move between them.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Thanks, Eddie, for that. I'm sure our viewers would be like especially the youth out there, they might be looking forward to gaining some experience in all three sectors and getting their own fine mix in between. So let's move on to the next question. There may be viewers out there who are looking forward to starting their own organization or expanding an existing one. What are some of the do's and don'ts that you can share, given your experience in association with the nonprofit sector? Your insight might be really useful. So let's hear from Louis. Louis, what do you think? What could be some do's and don'ts, quick tips?
I'm going to share three main do's for those who are willing or interested to create or to join the nonprofit sector. The first thing to do is to check the regulations and the policy in place, because you have to comply. First of all, if you want to create, to start non-government organizations, you want to register with the government office in charge of it. So registration requirements, reporting requirements, all those policy and regulations in place, and you have to comply with all of them. That's number one. Secondly, definitely you will need to work with people from different backgrounds. You need to keep in touch to know their real needs, because an NGO is there to solve a social problem. You are there to support solving any issue or a problem. So you need to understand the problem in local context. What are their problems? How they need to be supported. So you really have to keep in touch with them, to understand them, to know what they need and how you can work together to handle, to tackle those issues. That's number two. Number three, you need to be transparent in management. Second, because if you are an NGO, you are mobilizing funds from different sources, and to be trustworthy, you need also to work on transparency. How are you hiring? How are you? What are the process of outsourcing different things you need? That is tendering. How are you doing your financial regulations, your internal financial procedures? Do you have the audits which can really help people build trust in your organizations? So those are the main those that I consider to be more important when you want to establish a new or non-governmental organizations. On the part of don'ts, as you know, NGOs are independent from the government, so you should not be involved in local politics. You should not take part of what are the local politics on the field. If you take part, so you will definitely be people on the field might perceive you as being having a political bias on you, and the effectiveness of your programs, implementation of your programs may not really be effective as it was expected. You should not be involved in local politics. Of course, in addition to that, you should not be part of any terrorism group, you should not be racist. So there is really bad reputations. If you take part on them, then you can't come and tell that you are helping people. You need to be clean on yourselves so that people should not have any bias or a bad reputation in your organizations. Thank you.
That's all. That's all excellent advice, and I just want to mention that I was asked to speak today as an individual. So I'm not speaking today on behalf of MCW. Khalid is the executive director. I'm here today speaking as an individual. So actually, when I made my comment earlier about some local politics in my own community, that's my own local opinion. But I think that's excellent advice that we were just given, and I think that the transparency part is also very important. No matter what you do, there's no reason not to be transparent. If you feel that there's something to hide, then there's a problem. And I would say that those who are most transparent and find the appropriate ways of being transparent and the appropriate channels to communicate information will be successful. And that's in the for-profit, the nonprofit, and in the government context. I think one of the reasons also that in the for-profit world, it's been a little bit over time a little bit easier to measure, is that because in the for-profit world, the expectations are that you're measuring success based upon how successful you are financially, and you're making money or you're losing money. So in the other sectors, historically, they've been a little bit more difficult to measure, whether it's the nonprofit or government. But I think over time, as I mentioned, for-profit model is also being challenged now with these new ESGs, environmental, social, and governance metrics that are being placed on. But so the world of transparency is very important, not only in a financial way, but also just in general, being a transparent person. So I think a couple examples also that I think that I just would add to the conversation is surround yourself with mentors. Find people that you can learn from, people that have done things, people that have interesting backgrounds, mentors from different sectors, mentors from government, mentors from the nonprofit, educators, teachers, family members. Just surround yourself with as many people as possible that care about you and care about the mission that ultimately you want to do, and build up a team of mentors. And I think that would be one sort of advice. And the other one is think big, but act small. I think I say that because you know, I think that if you're going to go out and you're going to go make a difference in the world, you have to do it, with your heart saying, I'm going to go change the world. But at the end of the day, recognize that the way you're going to change the world is one person at a time, one community at a time, one little thing at a time. And if you've affected and if you've changed the life of one individual, or if you've picked up a piece of garbage on the street and your mission is environmental sustainability, and you've just picked up a little garbage, you've saved an animal, you've done something to fulfill your mission, you're doing it. And you've got to just start somewhere. And a lot of folks, I think, have a challenge with thinking big. So they get sort of stuck because they can't think big. And a lot of folks have a challenge because they think big, but they can't get anything done because they're just thinking big and they're just dreaming. And they can't actually figure out how to do it because they don't recognize how simple it is to do it. You just go out and you do it, and you just start with one little thing at a time. And those little things will ultimately start to become bigger things because more little things will start equaling bigger things. So don't get discouraged but by the challenges of the world or the challenges that you're up against. If you're just taking on a little piece of it, because that little piece is going to make a difference.
Wow, lovely set of advices. So all those who are watching right now, or maybe will tune in later, if you're looking forward to starting your own organization or expanding one, yours are some do's and don'ts from the experts themselves. So make sure to read the policy, register yourself as the organization. What are the rules and regulations? That's the do's part. Like see the get in touch with mentors, local contacts, get experience. Then, of course, being transparent is really important. So being transparent in your communications, then surround now, of course, as Eddie mentioned, think big, but act small. Go like you want to change the world out there, but one day at a time or one community at a time. I love that part. And of course, and as Louis mentioned, to be great, get some expertise on management skills. So you're going to go around and you're going to be involved in a lot of critical work, so fundraising and talking to people, presenting about your work. So how do you actually and build a team together? How do you get yourself equipped with it? And I'll connect with what Eddie said earlier about youth getting experience, and that he basically said go and get experience out there in 3 different sectors: volunteer, intern, and maybe that's how also you can start off with building one day at a time your skill set and expertise in starting your own organization. So thank you both. And then of course there were some different don'ts. The bigger one was don't get involved with all the politics out there, and just being concerned with your own local, the work that you're doing, the impact that you're going to create. Avoid controversy, which is an important don't. So keeping that into perspective. Now, in the interest of time, I had another question, which is really relatable with the world that we're living in the global pandemic, but I'll leave it for a bit later. But there's some interesting questions that are coming in from the audience, and let's take a moment to ask those. There's a question for Louis. So, Louis, from your personal experience and leadership experience, how do you think nonprofit organizations should involve or make private sector take part in advancement of their community transformation? How would you like to answer that?
As Eddie has mentioned something about that, non-government organizations cannot work without partnering with private organizations, with profit organizations, because as non-government organization, we receive fund, we fundraise money to implement our strategic plan. So of course, if you really need to achieve efficiency and effectiveness in program implementations, we have to look on how we bring on board also private companies from our operations area. So the first thing I would recommend is to visit them, present your plan to them, and try to share, to make them feel the same, share the same vision, your goals. So those who are committed to help you achieving your goals will make contribution. It might start small, but as you grow, as you reach to more people, the local funding will grow also, will be also increasing. So I'm seeing the local fundraising, partnering with local private companies as something which is key to achieving financial sustainability, to achieving financial independence, because bringing together more people from your local or locations where you are operating from will really make people feel they are involved, they feel engaged, and from those local engagements, also the impact you are creating will be huge.
Great. Thanks, Louis, for adding to that. Then we have another question for Eddie. So Eddie, the question is, the person asked, I'm aware that the ESG model which is an advanced model to CSR. Interestingly, this is the second time I'm getting to hear about it. How do you think nonprofit organizations can know more about this, and more importantly, get to implement it in their activity? Yeah, please help discuss that. That's a question from somebody who's from nonprofit sector, I assuming. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm also getting to learn more about this also, and I think a lot of times what happens, I've been around for a little bit of time now in the world of for-profit, nonprofit work. I did my master's thesis on social entrepreneurship about 17 years ago, and back then that was the first time the term was being used, sort of in the academic setting. Around the first time, there was some things written about it, and then there came out with new terms, and we're always going to have in the nonprofit world, we're always going to have, and now in the for-profit world, we're always going to have new terms that are going to come out. And new ways of packaging things that have always been in existence before. So I don't necessarily think it's anything particularly new. I think that it's being packaged differently, and I think that society, because of the advancements in technology, because of primarily because of the way that the world is shrinking, it's becoming more a global community. We're on this call right now. With 3 different continents speaking together, with participants calling in from all over the world, and we're having a discussion in our living rooms, and as though this is just like, some normal thing. And who would have thought this, during a global pandemic, who would have thought this would have taken place a year ago? Well, so the world is changing very quickly, and the terms that we use, in some ways, we're just sort of repackaging and respinning the terminology and things that we did before. But what's important now is to certain people and to certain circles wasn't necessarily as important as it was before. And I believe it's likely because of the shrinkage of the world, and because of the great challenges that our world faces in terms of sustainability with respect to environmental and social sustainability. So I would say that, again, continue to monitor what's being put out there, what's being said. I think that the importance of these ESG work is just as important for a large company as it is for smaller companies. It's also I think that as someone who has experience in the nonprofit space, working with communities, partner up with a local business, and as I said, just do it. And find something local in your community where you can add value to help your local restaurant, or your local petrol or gas station, or just your local business in the area. Partner up with them and help them become unique. Every business venture is always selling something, and the way you do it is through marketing. And how do you catch the attention of your customers? And everyone's selling. A lot of people are just selling the same thing. So how do you make it unique? Well, you can partner up with a nonprofit, and you can. And one of the ways of making the for-profit venture unique is because they're supporting the community and they're working with you, the nonprofit that's doing this, and you guys are partnering in some way or another. So again, think big, right? Think about what's happening in the world of the major companies in the world, and the big governments, what's being said in the news, and all this and ESGs. But think about how you can do something in your community and how you can apply it to your community and just get started. Because I can assure you that, like MCW, never did we think that MCW 20 years later would be doing this type of stuff and be where it is. There was no, we never started MCW with the idea that this is where it would be. Of course, thought big about it, but never could have dreamed this. And so you have to just get started with something, and just go out there and just do something.
Yeah, lovely. So go out and make a change, even if it's a small change. But just do it and get started. That would be a great thing. And also, I just want to reflect on the point that we started off with partnership and talking about collaboration. When you were talking about your own stories, how did you both end up into the nonprofit world? And it's interesting that we're almost at the end of the webinar. We still, as an advice, we are talking about the power of collaboration. We're talking about collaborating with local partners. We're talking about collaborating with different nonprofits, collaborating with for-profit organizations, and collaborating in the sense that we create a better or bigger impact, bigger than maybe what we could have done individually. So thanks for both of you for that. Now there's one last question, and there are a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So this is one question that we want to ask as a team in generally as well. So working in the nonprofit world comes with its own unique struggles, like limited resources, smaller teams, etc. And with the global pandemic adding to its own challenges, what are some tips for avoiding burnout? So who wants to go in first? Louis,
In
yeah.
my view, one of the ways to cope with the global challenges currently is to think how you can adapt yourself. One of the strategy is to review the plans, to review the budget, to review the workload, to see how you can make impact, achieve what you have planned with using your resources efficiently, because as you know, always the global challenges come with financial crisis. People don't get the money they have planned to use in their activities. So in that sense, in that way, you need to review the plans and to prioritize again, to see what are the most important activities that you can use with few funds that you have. For a small team, you have to do a multitasking. You see, seeing how you can give more tasks to few staff, how few staff can really deliver on the increasing task that they are receiving. So multitasking, reviewing the plans, looking how again they can mobilize local funds to support or to fill the gap in their financials can really be helpful.
Yeah, I would on the topic of burnout, I would share that from my experience that this is a topic that is very important to discuss in the nonprofit space, and it's also a topic that should have been discussed in more broadly prior to this pandemic. I think particularly in the nonprofit space, it's a space where we judge ourselves very critically because we want to do good in the world. We want to give back, and it's not easy to do good. And along the way, the biggest challenges and hurdles in doing good is going to be working with people. You're going to have situations that are going to come up that are going to make it very difficult to do good, and how you accept that and how you work through those challenges will ultimately determine whether or not you can survive the burnout factor, as well as how you take care of yourself. There's a book written by a poet that I've name was Shel Silverstein. It's called The Giving Tree, and it's a children's book. And I would encourage those who are not familiar with this to just to Google it. I'm sure there's some stuff on it. It's a very simple poetry book, and it's about a tree essentially that gives of every part of the tree because it's always trying to help. I think it's a young boy, and ultimately at the end of the book, the only thing that's left is the stump of the tree, and the tree actually gave itself away. And it wasn't able to continue giving because it didn't take care of itself. It gave away its the leaves and anything that the tree has. So you've got to take care of yourself, or you won't have anything to give. You've got to, in this particular pandemic, social isolation is real. It always has been. And I think this pandemic has made it even more real. And I think technology in general has contributed to social isolation. And the pandemic has only exacerbated that. And while it's amazing that we're on this call today, speaking with everyone all over the world, and the technology and the technological advancements have brought us so far and will bring us so far, and it's amazing what's going to come. The problem that we have to address is that there has to continue to be real people-to-people interaction. Technology cannot replace people. And I think that this is something that we're going to have to work through. This is an area that the nonprofit, those of you who are interested in the nonprofit world and making a difference, this is an area that you can really tap into, no matter what sector you're, no matter what your passion is, no matter what you're doing, you can do something in this area, so as to utilize technology, but to not forget at the end of the day that people are core and people are center. So if you're feeling burnt out, surround yourself with mentors, surround yourself with people that you can go talk to that will tell you, it's okay. Bad stuff happens, keep going. I think I just would say for MCW, one thing that I admire about MCW is the global network of folks from all over the world that are involved in so many different programs doing good. And oftentimes I get people reaching out to me all the time with different problems. And the first thing I always do is I always turn to Khalid. And I said, Khalid, there's got to be someone somewhere in the world that's working on this project. And then Khalid speaks to Regina, speaks to Anisha, speaks to Leon, and they find someone, lo and behold, out of the MCW network who's working on some similar project somewhere in the world. And because of this technology, which I've just said is problematic, you can connect with that person. And you can, so MCW can be a great network, and I would just encourage you to use it to connect with folks. But let's not forget what's important is that we're dealing with people, and technology can't replace people, and that I think is something that on the burnout front we've got to be very careful with.
Great. So as that was great. Thanks, Louis and Eddie. I know we're 6 minutes over time, but this was worth the conversation having. Considering that we are going through a global pandemic, of course, that can lead to a burnout. But how do we actually taking care of ourselves is really important. Of course, we would want to work more and create more impact. But at the end of the day, just like Eddie said, if you're like a giving tree, you might just be left with nothing at the end of the day. And what do you give more? How can you give more when there's nothing left within? So take care of yourself. Self-care is extremely important. Technology cannot replace people. And when Louis also mentioned about the small, like when limited resources, we were talking about utilize the local funds that are out there, and collaborate with people, network with people, and people cannot be replaced. That's a given factor, no matter how much we get connected. And it's beautiful that we are able to get together on this call today and do this webinar. But at the end of the day, technology cannot replace people. And as we're leading teams, as we're working with people from all over, be mindful of that part as well. And thank you, Eddie, and thank you, Louis, for adding to this. We still have a lot of questions coming in, so hopefully we can answer them after the webinar. We can take out some time to answer them in the chat box. But thank you, everybody, on behalf of the entire MCW team for tuning in today. I would want to thank both Louis and Eddie for giving your time today and your precious insights. For those who don't know, this is our first kind of a webinar, MCW Insights, and we'll be coming up with a lot of more engaging conversations with our different global thought leaders. So make sure to stay tuned. Once again, thank you, Louis and Eddie, for your wonderful insights. We are looking forward to interacting with you in different capacities. Thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anisha. Thank you.